It's a warm and sunny Saturday morning over in San Antonio, Texas, and Lost Tech City and its 400 players from all over the United States are about to bear witness to one of the rarest phenomena in Smash. Wait, what happened? They're playing the same character? That's the rarest thing in Smash? Well, it turns out when a game has a massive roster of almost 90 characters, yeah, it kinda is. This is Base Mage. He was ranked number 1 in his home state of Arizona and went on to be ranked as the 43rd best Ultimate player in the world in 2022's rankings. This guy is Hungrybox, one of the best melee players in the world who wasn't quite able to translate that skill into the new title. Base Mage should win this, that much is obvious.
Oh, wow, that was wild, but not gone. 118, just getting away from them, get a good reset on the neutral.
The second time?
Roll in the second time, and that is gonna do it.
Now, HBox defeating the higher-seeded Base Mage, not to mention his own coach, can already go down as an upset that should be practically unthinkable. The best Jigglypuff player in North America had been defeated by his own character. But Base Mage is not the only top player to have lost to his own main. Throughout the history of Smash Ultimate, strong players have struggled and lost against opponents playing their own characters. The question is, why, in what should be the most even matchup the game can give you, the most pure test of skill Ultimate has to offer, do these upsets keep happening? Let's find out. Okay, in the traditional FGC community, a set between two representatives of the same character is often called a mirror match, but since Smash is so fun and quirky and cool, they want to call these matchups dittos instead. Now, if I were to ask you if the better player should always win the ditto, your first thought would probably be, well, yeah, obviously. In dittos or mirrors, I'm just going to call them dittos from here on out, both players have access to the exact same characters with the exact same moves, options, and strategies. Surely, in a situation where both competitors have identical tools at their disposal, the better player should win, if not every time, at least in the vast majority of cases. It's a no-brainer. And yet, as we'll come to find out, we happen to see pretty frequently that the opposite seems to be true. For those of you who have watched Melee at the recent Canadian Super Major Get On My Level X, you probably saw the Nailbiter Game 5 Puff Ditto between SDJ and Hungrybox. And those of you who didn't tune in have at least seen the clip of HBox's reaction to winning the set in a reverse 3-0. Let's just say, yeah, the chair's broken. Anyway, SDJ may have not won that set, but taking 2 games off of inarguably the best Puff to ever touch Melee, as a Jigglypuff player themselves, goes to show that even on a completely even playing field, some surprising results are possible. And the same is definitely true in Ultimate. Even in Ultimate's exceptionally shorter lifespan, we've seen dozens of instances where the top-level players are defeated in bracket at the hands of their own characters. Tweak lost the Pokemon Trainer Ditto to Leffen back at Ultimate Summit 2, Neo beat Shattuck in the Corrin Ditto at Genesis X earlier this year, and there seems to be a pattern of top players losing this mirror matchup scenario with a startling regularity. In fact, among the stats-focused section of the community, there's a phrase you'll often see tossed around in conversations about mirror matches describing this phenomenon exactly: worst player wins the Ditto. Now, disclaimer, this phrase isn't meant to diss any player involved in an upset Ditto match, but it's instead meant to highlight the frequency with which these unexpected results occur, and how volatile Dittos, a perceived even matchup, can be in the first place. But before we look into why top players so often lose the Ditto, and I promise I won't drag you on for too much longer, we first have to ask, does it even happen that often to begin with? Sure, there may be individual high-profile cases of strong players losing Dittos, but is there actually any fire under that smoke, or are these unexpected wins just prominent exceptions to the rule? Okay, first let's define what it means for a result to be unexpected. For the purposes of this video, the underdog in a Ditto is either the player ranked lower on the ranking nearest to when the set takes place, or the player with less experience on that character. Say Akola's Kazuya, which was a rare secondary, versus T's Kazuya, which sees fairly regular use in certain matchups, versus Riddle's Kazuya, which was at least his co-main. From a sampling of high-level competitive Dittos across Ultimate's lifetime, we found that in roughly 33% of these sets, the result was a victory for the underdog, with about another 20% of sets going to the final game. So while the so-called worst player doesn't win the Ditto the majority of the time, they still do win around 1 out of 3 high-level mirror matches, which is often enough to be notable. And in more of half of the sampled Dittos, the stronger player, who we'd initially expect to dominate on a completely even playing field such as this, has a much tougher time than we'd anticipate, either being pushed to the brink of defeat or just losing the set straight up. Mirror matches aren't immediate losses for top players by any means, but they are shockingly dangerous territory. Okay, so now that we've established the volatility of Dittos in Ultimate from a statistical perspective, the natural next step is asking where that volatility originates from a gameplay perspective. What is it exactly about Dittos in this game that so often leads to the stronger competitor's defeat? Overall, I think there are 3 main factors we can point to that most frequently contribute to these mirror match upsets, so let's go over each of them. So first, let me ask you, what differentiates the excellent and the average players from a gameplay perspective? Well, you'd expect the better player to win neutral more often, thus having more interactions go in your favor. You'd expect them to have better punish games, thus needing fewer favorable interactions to take stocks and eventually games. Over time, the player with the better odds at getting an advantage state and converting to take a stock should naturally pull ahead on most occasions. So it's perhaps fitting then that the first cause of Ditto upsets is the volatility inherent to some fighters in Ultimate. There are characters in this game who only need 1 or 2 interactions to take a stock, and when you only need to win neutral a few times instead of a few dozen, being a stronger player becomes much more quote-unquote feasible. Now, the obvious poster child for this phenomenon is Kazuya, whose combo game and access to one of the best smash moves ever in Electric lets him reliably vaporize stocks off of even a single hit. I mean, look at what T does here. This is just stupid. But Kazuya Dittos are notoriously some of the fastest paced and least predictable games Ultimate has to offer, so it shouldn't come as much of a surprise that Riddles, the best Kazuya in the world, lost the Ditto in top 8 of French Major Ultimate Wanted 4 to the best Japanese Kazuya, T. And it should only be a little more unexpected that T has lost both of the Kazuya Dittos he's played against Akola, who, yeah, caveat, he's the global rank 1, but in 99 games out of 100 he chooses to play Steve rather than the Terror from Tekken. Hey, speaking of Steve, you should subscribe to the channel. That was such a good transition. I love it so much. Anyway, every Twitch chatter's favorite Smash fighter is another character who's pretty unstable in the Ditto. Steve is well known for dishing out tons of damage with reliable ladder combos and pick loops, as well as taking stocks criminally early with an upgraded tool. The nature of Steve's resource bar, though, means that whichever Steve takes the first stock can hold a real, actual material advantage throughout the rest of the game. This was the case in Winners Finals of the Big House 11, where in Game 5, Syrup took the first stock off of the #1 North American Steve, Onin, and from then just had more iron than them for the entire match. Syrup leveraged his advantage, taking Onin's remaining 2 stocks with a powered minecart and an anvil. Another character whose Ditto comes with some inherent volatility is Min Min. A character who excels at edgeguard yet has an exploitable recovery? Yeah, Min Min kind of destroys herself in the Ditto. We saw this in full effect when Doramigi was able to beat Proto Banham, who had long held the title of best Min Min in the world at Meisuma Top 13 with his deep offstage gambles and amazing reads. Unless you start thinking that, like everything else, the Fighters Pass 2 characters get everything, and volatile Dittos are the exclusive property of this DLC pack, we should mention the Olimar Ditto, which at top level looks a bit like 2 people learning to play the game for the first time. It's just honestly chaos. Somehow throughout this pandemonium, Myron was able to come out on top at Frostbite 2019 over the then considered best Olimar in the world, Shootone. So with volatility in the matchup out of the way, let's move on to the other ways that an underdog can gain an edge in the Ditto. Whenever a high-level mirror match takes place, the dynamic is usually something like this. The stronger player is often the best rep of that character worldwide, or at least in their region, whose playstyle is often seen as the definitive way to play said fighter, while their opponent is usually a less proven competitor who pilots the character in a way that's, on the surface, maybe less optimal or effective. But sometimes, those unconventional strategies or playstyles are just what an underdog player needs to turn a mirror match on its head. So here's an example. Tweak, the longtime best player in the USA, may have become a near solo Diddy main in the post-quarantine era, but pre-quarantine he was known for piloting a diverse cast of fighters in bracket. Though he started Ultimate as a Wario main and had various stints with characters like Young Link, Wolf, and Roy, his most iconic main for the first year of Ultimate was probably his Pokemon trainer. Tweak pushed Trainer to the greatest heights this characters have ever experienced in Ultimate, with results like first place at Low Tier City 7 and second at EVO 2019. But at Smash Ultimate Summit 2, a rough showing in round-robin pools meant that Tweak started the prestigious Invitational's final bracket in losers, facing off against the second most prominent Pokemon trainer main of the time, Leffen. Yeah, for those of you who hadn't been following Ultimate since its early days, there was a period of time where Leffen, famous for his bevy of accomplishments in not just Melee but other fighting games as well, was a very active and serious competitor in Smash Ultimate. His rather short Ultimate career is nonetheless filled with impressive highlights like top 24 finishes at Genesis, SmashCon, and Mainstage, an event win over some of Europe's best at DreamHack Winter 2019, and this set, where in 5 games of the Pokemon trainer Ditto, Leffen defeated Tweak, the greatest player to ever touch the character. Now, how did he do it? Well, the trainer Ditto can only barely be called a Ditto here, so there is a bit of an asterisk, since Pokemon Trainer is really just 3 characters in a trench coat. Figuring out which Pokemon to use in each situation was a huge part of playing the character at the top level, and nowhere did it matter more than in the mirror match. Tweak, who picked up the character after a few patches, tended to favor Squirtle, who was fast but light and had devastating combos but was hard to close out stocks with. Leffen, who mained Pokemon Trainer since almost day 1 of the game's release, gravitated towards Ivysaur, who in earlier patches of the game far outclassed the other 2/3 of the trainer trio. And then, Charizard. But throughout their set, this difference in Pokemon selection was put on full display. Tweak's Squirtle would win neutral and rack up damage with long combo strings, but it struggled to find kills until high percents. Leffen's Ivysaur, on the other hand, had no problem finding early kills with the grass type's potent edge-guarding tools and surprising kill power, which allowed him to keep pace in a different way. You can see the effectiveness of Leffen's Ivysaur usage in 2 key moments. After 2-stocking Leffen in the first game, Tweak carries that momentum into the second, getting off to a huge early lead. But with Leffen's Ivysaur off stage at more than 100% and Tweak sitting below 40, Tweak chooses to stick it out as Squirtle rather than switching Pokemon to try and kill him earlier. Leffen survives all the way to 174%, hits Tweak at 72 center stage with the back air and combos that into Vine Whip, and bam, Leffen's suddenly up. By holding his ground with Ivysaur, Leffen prevents Tweak from getting a stock lead and goes on to win Game 2. The other moment was in Game 3, where Tweak actually does maintain a stock lead and then some, taking Leffen all the way up to 126 before his first stock falls. Respawning as Squirtle, Tweak has more than enough time and invincibility to switch to Ivysaur and try to take out Leffen's fragile second stock. But once again, he chooses to try to get the kill with Squirtle. Despite a 20-second ledge trap sequence where Tweak hits a down tilt at ledge and 2 forward throws, Leffen's Ivysaur hangs on and makes it on stage to deal 64% before Tweak finally takes the kill with a back throw. And that damage was relevant. It helped Leffen quickly strike back on his last stock and ultimately win the game from the following roughly even scenario. Now, we do see Tweak notice this Squirtle overuse from this point on. He actually doesn't use this Pokemon to take any more of Leffen's stocks for the remainder of the set, but it just felt a little bit too late, as Leffen was able to close out a Game 5 with a resounding 3-stock. Here, Leffen was able to take the upset over Tweak's more accomplished Pokemon trainer by leveraging the strengths his more Ivysaur-centric playstyle had over Tweak's more Squirtle-centric play. Namely, surviving longer against a low kill power character and using that opportunity to keep things even with early edge guards and KOs of his own. Tweak's high Squirtle usage may have been more effective in the general meta, as evidenced by his higher degree of success with the character, but against Leffen, it just didn't get the job done. Another prominent case of playstyle differences swinging the Ditto in the underdog's favor came from Zomba vs Anathema at Rise and Grind 2022. In Losers Finals, with an invite on the line for Summit 5, both competitors were in a position where they had to pull out all the stops. Although Zomba was far and away the more accomplished player that year, whose fast, aggressive Rob play was driving a new wave of results for the character, Anathema had an X factor that Zomba didn't, a deep mastery over Rob's zero-to-death gyro combos. Anathema had been showing off these deadly conversions throughout the bracket, and this set was no different. After taking Zomba's first stock in Game 1, Anathema hit a wild combo to turn a small lead into a full stock advantage, more or less guaranteeing Game 1. Although this would be the only zero-to-death Anathema would hit throughout the set, his superior gyro combos and control continued to serve him throughout the rest, giving him higher damage options for punishes and more threatening edge guards. Not to mention, it also forced Zomba to play around the possibility that it could just happen again, that a single bad hit could end his stock even when he hadn't yet taken a single percentage of damage. In every game that Anathema won in that set, he had 2-stock Zomba, and his stronger gyro combos played a huge role in facilitating those 3 dominant games. And finally, there's one more big factor that goes into these character Ditto upsets, and that's matchup inexperience. Now, hold on, I'm sure you're saying, how can a top player possibly not know the matchup against their own main? I mean, it is their own character. As top players, they should already know everything to expect. Furthermore, improving in a matchup by picking up a problematic character and figuring out their strengths and weaknesses firsthand has long been an effective practice in Ultimate. So it just makes sense that these top players should be prepared to deal with the characters they've invested the most time into. But practicing with a character to learn where they struggle is a fundamentally different mindset from playing a character as a main, and similarly, understanding what a character can do is different from having a game plan prepared to go against them. A top player can, very rightfully I think, feel confident in the Ditto and their ability to outplay their opponents, only to be blindsided by any of the dozens of interactions and habits that emerge only once the game is being played. Sometimes this can be differences in strategies like those we covered before, and other times it might just come down to individual habits or options their opponents may favor. In Umeki vs Mudace at Port Priority 8, for example, Mudace tended to favor safer turnip edgeguards and ledge traps, while Umeki opted several times to run off stage and throw out a counter, hoping to catch the rising hitbox of Mudace's recovery. By Game 5, Umeki was able to adapt to Mute's use of turnips, and as a result lived about 20% longer than him per stock. Unfortunately for Mudace, he wasn't able to adapt in time, repeatedly recovering at angles Umeki could cover with counter, and as such lost the game to this strategy. And the Smash Analyst Trade War has already covered how, at Genesis X this year, Neo used a risky style of Corrin, focusing on early kills to defeat Shattuck, who had only started matching his big swings in Game 5. The point is, regardless of how much experience these players may have on their own characters, they may have very little experience playing the Ditto. Only over the course of actually playing a mirror match at high level do they figure out everything that does or doesn't work, and different players will learn at different rates. That is the last source of volatility in Dittos, the same matchup inexperience that sometimes lets low-tier mains knowledge check stronger players, except that in these scenarios, the lack of knowledge is completely reasonable. We haven't really brought it up so far, but Dittos in Ultimate are extremely rare. Unlike Melee, where you guys seem to think Fox actually is the only playable character, but aside from that, they've had at least one Ditto in top 8 of every major this year. With how large Ultimate's cast is and how viable most of the characters are, it's not uncommon for entire top 64s of majors to be devoid of mirror matches. With such a high volume of matchups to learn and so many good characters to be prepared for, it's honestly no surprise that learning how to fight your own character isn't at the top of everyone's list. Again, even back to Melee, where we play more than Fox, I promise, the only really common Ditto we see is Fox. With the exception of Spark vs Jmook at Pat's House 4, a Sheik Ditto that went in favor of Spark, which was an upset, and HBox vs SGJ at Gommel X, where you know what happened. But there is one piece of data that I think best highlights the role matchup and experience can play in Dittos, and it's this. Whenever the stronger player loses the Ditto, they almost always win the runback. Riddles won his rematch with T at Meisuma Top 12, Zomba got the runback on Anathema at Cirque du CFL 3, and Shattuck bested Neo at Diamond Dust just 4 months after Genesis. After losing 1-3 to Larry Lur at one of Ultimate's earliest majors, Light has not lost the Fox Ditto in years, despite contending with the likes of ZD, Louis Money, and Kaninabe. Hell, even in the case of our first matchup, Base Mage vs Hungrybox, Base managed to get the runback later in that same event, eliminating HBox in the losers bracket. This tendency for players who lose the Ditto only to go on and win it on their next try makes it pretty clear to me, at least, that a large part of this volatility in mirror matches comes from some unpreparedness on the part of the stronger player. Competitors who expect to just outplay their opponents on an even playing field get a somewhat rude awakening, but there on out they know what to expect and can leverage their superior experience, game sense, or just other aspects of their play to win subsequent Dittos. So there you have it. Though character Dittos in Ultimate might seem at first glance to be the perfect venue to determine who is the stronger player once and for all, in reality these matchups can be wildly unpredictable. Factors like character volatility, playstyle differences, and matchup inexperience can and have resulted in some truly absurd-looking mirror match upsets. Since Dittos are so rare in Ultimate with close to 90 unique playable characters and thousands of potential matchups, top players can sometimes get caught off guard. But we found that once they get upset in a mirror match once, it'll rarely happen to them again. And even those who fall victim to their own mains on multiple occasions shouldn't take it all that hard. After all, they're in good and plentiful company. Thanks for watching. Hey, please like the video and subscribe to the channel if you enjoy the content, and we have a lot more coming soon. See you next time!